All right, welcome to the deep dive. You ready to get into it today? Today we're going to be tackling diaspora, which is a term that I know you're eager to understand beyond just the basics. You've given us such a fascinating mix of materials to work with too. Like, wow, academic articles, book chapters, even reports on global migration patterns.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, some of them are pretty dense, but that's what we're here for, right? To make this journey not only insightful, but fun too.
Yeah, we're like taking a whole research project and turning it into like this captivating conversation.
Exactly. So let's start with the word itself.
Right.
Diaspora. It's got Greek roots, right? Meaning dispersal.
Yeah, like scattering seeds.
I like that, yeah. And historically, it was closely tied to the Jewish experience of being dispersed from their homeland.
Yeah.
But like you're interested in, the term is really broadened significantly.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like those seeds landed in all sorts of different soil, which has led to so many different kinds of growth. So how do we even define diaspora today? Like, who fits under that umbrella? It's kind of a big question.
It is a big question, and that's where it gets interesting. We see political refugees, immigrants, even ethnic or religious minorities who are living outside their perceived homeland. The sources even mention climate refugees now as like a whole other category.
Wow.
So it really raises the question, though, is diaspora about forced dispersal, or is it simply about living away from a place you identify with?
Yeah, and the sources you provided actually highlight this debate.
Yeah.
Like William Safran, he's one of the big names in diaspora studies, and he created a framework with 6 key features of a diaspora.
Oh, yeah. He's a big one. So he argued that a diaspora involves dispersal from a homeland, then you have a collective memory of that place, and there's a sense of displacement in the new society, and then often a desire to return eventually. You'll find his framework mentioned a lot in the materials you provided, but, not everyone agrees with all 6 points.
Well, it's a starting point, though,
For sure.
like to get us thinking about it. But then we have Robin Cohen, who really emphasizes the trauma and like the emotional weight of diaspora,
Yeah.
particularly that longing for a lost homeland.
Yeah, and Cohen's work really resonated strongly with groups like the Armenian diaspora who experienced forced migration and genocide. Their collective memory and yearning for their homeland are central to their identity. And that really shows how different frameworks can be more relevant to specific cases.
It's true, yeah. And this reminds me of something you highlighted from Kachik Tololian's work, where he stressed the connection between the diaspora, the homeland A&D, the host country, this constant interplay, not just looking back, but how that past shapes your present life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tololian's framework really emphasizes the complexities of belonging. He pointed out that diasporas are not just about maintaining ties to a homeland, but also about how those ties evolve and interact with the new environment.
It's like you're carrying your history with you, but also creating a new chapter in a different place. But, even with all these frameworks, the concept itself keeps evolving. It's not a static box.
Right, right. And Stephen Vertovec, another scholar you've been reading, brought in the impact of globalization and technology. He argued that we need to look at homeland ties, transnational activities, and the relationship with the Hostland 3 dimensions, all influencing each other.
So it's not just about where you're from, but what you do and how you connect with both places.
Exactly.
And speaking of connections, we can't ignore technology's role in all this, especially with what they call digital diasporas.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one now.
Huge. Yeah. And this is where that anecdote from your WeChat study gets so fascinating. It found that Chinese migrants in Russia, they rely heavily on human networks for work. Even though they have WeChat, they don't use it much for that.
Interesting.
But Russian migrants in China, they depend heavily on WeChat to survive in that job market.
Really? That's fascinating.
It is, isn't it? Why do you think that is? Like, does it challenge the idea that technology creates a level playing field for diasporas? I mean, it's a very specific example, but...
Well, it definitely suggests that technology's impact is nuanced, for sure. It interacts with existing social structures and power dynamics. In the Russian case, it might be about trust or pre-existing community ties that tech can't replace. But for Russians in China, WeChat might be giving them access they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, it's like they're using it to overcome obstacles.
Possibly.
Yeah, it reminds me of Benedict Anderson's concept of imagined communities. The idea that even without face-to-face contact, people can feel connected through shared experiences, beliefs, or in this case, technology.
That's a great connection. Yeah, digital spaces can become incredibly important for maintaining a sense of belonging and shared identity, especially when you're physically dispersed. It's like the internet creates this virtual homeland.
Right. So we've got these frameworks for understanding diaspora, but you wanted to dig into a real-world example too, right? The Chinese diaspora. And it's huge, it's complex, it's been evolving for centuries. Where do we even begin with that one?
Let's start with the historical context, because it's crucial for understanding the modern Chinese diaspora. You're reading about centuries of migration, particularly to Southeast Asia, a lot of that driven by trade, labor opportunities, and sometimes political upheaval.
Yeah. And those historical communities laid the groundwork for the diaspora we see today, right? But modern Chinese migration has a whole new set of motivations and complexities.
Absolutely. And now we're talking about students seeking education, professionals looking for global careers, even investor immigrants seeking new lifestyles or financial opportunities. It's not just about leaving China anymore, but about China's place in the world.
And that kind of brings us to the size of the Chinese diaspora, which, as your sources point out, is surprisingly hard to pin down. Estimates range from 10 million to 45 million. That's a huge difference.
It all comes down to how we define Chinese diaspora, as you're finding out. The lower estimates focus on people born in China currently living elsewhere. It's straightforward, but kind of limited.
Because it misses out on all the descendants, right? People who may not have been born in China, but whose lives are still shaped by their heritage.
Exactly. So the broader definition includes those descendants, recognizing that cultural identity and connection to a homeland aren't always tied to birthplace. This is especially relevant in places like Southeast Asia, where Chinese communities have existed for generations.
Right. So within this vast and diverse diaspora, we have a mix of motivations and experiences. Your sources highlight the types of Chinese migrants we see today. Labor migrants seeking work contracts, entrepreneurs engaged in trade and commerce, and those focused on family reunification.
And even within those categories, there's diversity based on skill levels, education, and economic backgrounds. It's a reminder that the Chinese diaspora isn't monolithic. It's made up of individuals with unique stories and journeys.
Okay, this is already giving me a much clearer picture of the Chinese diaspora, but there's one more detail that jumped out from your research.
Right.
The feminization of the diaspora in recent years. What's driving that shift?
It's multifaceted, but one factor is the rise of female Chinese students studying abroad. As China's economy boomed, education became a priority, and more families could afford to send their daughters overseas. Many of these women then chose to build their lives and careers abroad.
So it's a ripple effect of China's growth and changing social norms. More women pursuing higher education translates to a larger female presence in the diaspora.
And it's not just education. The sources also highlight the rise of international marriages with Chinese wives. This can be linked to globalization, increased mobility, and shifting cultural attitudes towards marriage.
So the landscape of the Chinese diaspora is constantly changing, shaped by global forces and individual choices. But one thing remains constant, right? This idea of negotiating your identity between two worlds.
Absolutely, and that's what we'll delve deeper into in part 2. We'll explore how these individuals and communities build their lives and navigate their identities in their new contexts.
It's like we're starting to see the human stories behind the statistics and frameworks. Can't wait to dive deeper. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our exploration of diaspora, and I'm really curious to unpack this idea of negotiating your identity between two worlds. It seems so complicated.
It's a fascinating dynamic for sure. You're right, it's not just about physically relocating to a new place. It's this constant process of figuring out who you are in this new context and how your heritage fits in.
The sources you provided make this point really well. They say the diaspora is about so much more than just where you come from.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It's about how you build a life, a sense of belonging, in a place that might feel very different.
And that process of building and belonging looks different for everyone, you know? Like it's shaped by so many factors, things like language, religion, cultural practices, social network, even simple things like food or music can become so loaded with meaning.
Yeah. It's like every interaction, every choice becomes part of this ongoing negotiation. And it's not static either, right? This sense of self can actually evolve over time and even across generations.
Absolutely. One of your sources talks about the experience of second-generation immigrants, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Children who grow up straddling two cultures. You know, they might speak their parents' language at home, but then they navigate a totally different world at school or with their friends.
And that makes me think about the concept of hybridity, because those individuals, they aren't simply replicating their parents' culture. They're actually creating something totally new. It's a blend of influences.
And that hybridity can be a real source of strength creativity, and even resilience. It allows individuals to draw on different cultural resources and perspectives to navigate a really complex world.
It's like having a wider range of tools in your toolkit,
Oh,
right?
totally. Yeah.
But I imagine it can also be challenging, like you're constantly being pulled in these different directions, just trying to reconcile different parts of yourself.
Yeah, you're right. It can definitely be a source of tension and internal conflict as well. There might be pressure to conform to the dominant culture while also trying to stay connected to your heritage. It's a balancing act, for sure.
And that brings us back to the Chinese diaspora. Because we were talking about its historical roots, the diverse motivations for migration, and the challenges of even defining its size. But how does this idea of identity negotiation play out in this specific case?
Well, the Chinese diaspora offers some really interesting examples. Think about the historical communities in Southeast Asia, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
They faced immense pressure to assimilate, but they also managed to preserve a lot of their language, traditions, and even their business networks.
It's like they were creating these pockets of their own culture
Yeah.
within a totally different society.
Right.
But they weren't completely separate, right? There must have been a lot of cultural exchange and blending.
Exactly. It was definitely a two-way street. Chinese migrants adapted to the local customs and languages, but at the same time, they also influenced the cuisine, architecture, and even the religious landscape of their host countries.
It makes you wonder how those early experiences of migration and integration might have shaped the identities of later generations.
That's a great question. And it really highlights the importance of understanding diaspora not as like a snapshot in time, but as a continuous process that unfolds over multiple generations.
Right. It keeps going.
Hmm.
So we've got this historical backdrop, but as we talked about earlier, modern Chinese migration is so much more diverse. It's driven by everything from education to like global business. How does that impact identity?
Well, for one thing, it means that there's no single Chinese diaspora identity. A Chinese student studying in the US, for example, might have a very different experience and sense of self than, say, a Chinese entrepreneur setting up a business in Africa.
That makes sense. Yeah, like their motivations, their daily interactions, even their challenges and opportunities would all be shaped by their specific context.
Exactly. And yet, despite all those differences, there might also be common threads that connect them. Maybe it's a shared language, a sense of cultural heritage, or even a similar experience of navigating between those two worlds.
It's like there's this spectrum of belonging. You can identify strongly with your Chinese heritage while also embracing the cultural influences of your host country. It doesn't have to be an either situation.
You've hit on a key point there. Diaspora identity is often fluid and multifaceted. It can change over time, it can be influenced by context, and it can involve a really complex interplay of different cultural influences.
That fluidity is so fascinating to me. It challenges the idea that identity is fixed or predetermined. It suggests that who we are is constantly being negotiated and redefined through our experiences and interactions with the world around us.
For sure, and this idea of negotiation becomes even more complex when we consider the role of technology.
Ah, yes. We were talking about digital diasporas in that WeChat study earlier. How does technology impact this process of identity formation?
Well, it's a game changer in many ways. Think about how social media allows people to stay connected with their homeland, like to access news and information, to engage in cultural practices even when they're physically dispersed.
Like having a virtual portal to your heritage, right?
Yeah.
A way to maintain a sense of belonging even when you're thousands of miles away.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful for individuals who are trying to navigate their identities in a new context. It can provide a sense of continuity, a link to their roots.
But it's not just about connecting with the past,
Right.
because social media can also help diasporas build new communities, find support networks, and even create new cultural expressions.
You're absolutely right. Think about all the online forums, social media groups, and virtual events that bring together people from the same diaspora.
Yeah.
It allows them to share their experiences, build relationships, and even create new forms of cultural production.
It's like they're creating a digital space that reflects their unique hybrid identities, a place where they can express themselves and connect with others who really understand their experiences.
Yeah, I like that. And these digital spaces can be incredibly important for fostering a sense of agency and empowerment. They can allow diasporas to raise their voices, advocate for issues they care about, and even challenge dominant narratives about their communities.
It's like technology is giving them a platform to shape their own stories and to reclaim their own identities. But I imagine it's not all positive, right? Like there must be some potential downsides to this increased connectivity.
Yeah, you're right to be cautious about that. Technology can also be a double-edged sword. It can be used to spread misinformation, to reinforce stereotypes, and even to exploit diaspora communities for political or economic gain.
It's a reminder that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to be critical consumers of information and to use technology in ways that strengthen rather than weaken our connections to each other.
And that brings us to another important aspect of diaspora identity, the idea of transnationalism.
Oh, this is something I've been wanting to ask about. What exactly does that term mean in the context of diaspora?
Well, transnationalism refers to the ways in which diasporas engage in activities and maintain connections that transcend national borders. It's about recognizing that their lives and identities are not confined to a single location.
So it's not just about maintaining ties to your homeland, but about creating new connections and networks that actually span multiple countries.
Exactly. And this can take many forms, from economic activities and business ventures to political activism and cultural exchange. It's about recognizing that diasporas have this unique ability to bridge different worlds and to operate on a global scale.
I can see how this ties back to the concept of fluidity we were discussing earlier. Diasporas aren't simply replicating their cultures in new locations, they're actively creating new connections and shaping new realities that transcend national boundaries.
And that brings us back to the Chinese diaspora, which offers some fascinating examples of transnationalism in action. Think about all those overseas Chinese business networks.
Right.
They've played a significant role in facilitating trade and investment between China and other countries.
Right. Those networks often leverage personal connections and shared cultural understanding to navigate the complexities of international business. They're like a testament to the economic power and global reach of the Chinese diaspora.
And it's not just about those economic ties either. We're also seeing Chinese diaspora communities engaging in political activism, both in their host countries and in relation to events back in China.
Like they're using their voices and their resources to advocate for issues that are important to them. Whether it's promoting human rights in China or supporting pro-democracy movements, it's a powerful reminder that diasporas can be agents of social and political change.
And technology is playing an increasingly important role in facilitating these transnational connections. The internet and social media have created this virtual space where diasporas can connect, share information, and even mobilize for collective action. It's like they're creating a digital homeland, a space where they can maintain a sense of belonging and shared identity, even when they're scattered across the globe.
That's such a powerful image, and it highlights this complex interplay between diaspora, identity, and technology in our increasingly globalized world. It seems like the traditional boundaries of diaspora are becoming more fluid and porous as individuals and communities create new forms of connection and belonging.
And this raises an important question. What does the future hold for diaspora communities in a world that's becoming increasingly interconnected, but also increasingly fragmented at the same time?
That's a great question to ponder as we move into Part 3 of our deep dive into diaspora studies. Welcome back. As we wrap up our deep dive into diaspora, I keep thinking about that question you left us with. Like, what does the future hold for these communities in a world that feels both connected and divided at the same time? It's kind of a tough one.
It is a paradox, isn't it? I mean, globalization brings us closer together in a lot of ways, but we also see rising nationalism, political tensions, and economic inequalities that can really pull people apart.
And in your research, you pointed out how those global forces can actually shape the experiences of diaspora communities in both positive and negative ways.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the economic side of things. We see diasporas contributing so much to their host countries through things like entrepreneurship and innovation.
Right.
But then on the flip side, some migrants face exploitation, They get stuck in these really precarious jobs with low wages and few protections.
Yes.
It's just a good reminder, I think, that diaspora isn't a one-size-fits-all experience.
Yeah. It's not all success stories, unfortunately. And then there's the political dimension of this. We talked about how diasporas can be these powerful voices for change, advocating for their homelands or for their rights in their new countries.
Right.
But those same connections can also make them targets of suspicion or even discrimination.
Oh, yeah, for sure. One of your sources even talked about how diasporas can sometimes get caught in the crossfire of international conflicts. Like their loyalties are questioned and they might face pressure from both sides.
Wow.
It's a good reminder, I think, that these communities often have to navigate these really complex political landscapes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've got economic forces, political tensions, And then there's the whole issue of technology, too. We were talking about digital diasporas earlier as this force for connection and empowerment, but you also cautioned us about the potential downsides.
Yeah, exactly. Because the same technology that allows diasporas to stay connected can also be used for things like surveillance and censorship and even the spread of harmful misinformation. So it's just really crucial, I think, for individuals to be aware of those risks and to develop critical media literacy skills.
It's like you have to be smart about how you use it.
Yeah, for sure.
That makes me think about the role of education in all this. And I don't just mean for individuals within the diaspora, but for the wider society as well. Like, how do we promote understanding and inclusion in a world where people's connections to place and identity are becoming more and more complex?
That's such a key question, and it goes beyond just teaching like facts about different cultures, right? It's
Yeah.
about fostering empathy, critical thinking, and the ability to engage with all these different perspectives. That's really what helps us bridge those divides, I think.
It's like we need a whole new approach to citizenship in a globalized world, one that recognizes the fluidity of identity and the value of these diverse perspectives.
You're right. It's not just about where you're from, but where you're going, and how those different parts of your identity shape your contributions to society. And I think that kind of brings us back to the initial goal of this deep dive, understanding this concept of diaspora in all its complexity.
And I have to say, my understanding has definitely evolved. We started with those academic frameworks, which were helpful for just getting a grasp on the key concepts. But then we actually connected those frameworks to real-world examples like the Chinese diaspora, and it really brought the whole topic to life.
It's like those theoretical seeds we talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah.
They've taken root and grown into something much richer and more nuanced.
Exactly. And I think the key takeaway for me is that diaspora is not just about physical displacement. It's about this ongoing process of negotiating your identity, building new communities, and creating connections that transcend all these borders.
And it's a good reminder, I think, that even in a world that often feels so fractured, there are these really powerful forces that bring people together. Things like shared histories, cultural ties, the human desire for belonging. These are the threads that weave the tapestry of diaspora.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with one final thought to ponder. Given everything we've discussed about the evolving nature of diaspora, its complexities and its implications in this interconnected world, what do you think are the biggest opportunities and challenges facing these communities in the years to come?
Yeah, what do you think? Like, how can we harness the positive potential of these connections while also mitigating those risks? It's not an easy question.
It's definitely something to think about. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Until next time.